Okay, this video is Bible Quotes Part 2. I just periodically am going to make more of these videos. I'm not going in a specific order. I have a whole bunch of summaries of stuff from the Bible, and I'm kind of going through that. Hopefully this will be interesting or entertaining to you. And I mean, there's all kinds of ways to study the Bible, all right? But hopefully this will be fun. The first thing I'm going to show here is this is a page from the website called BibleHub.org. This is my favorite Bible website. You just type in a couple words from a quote from the Bible you're interested in, and it'll pop up all the different Bible versions of it, and so you can find the one that you like best. I mean, I like things that are phrased in the most memorable way, the most literary. So I often will use the King James Bible. I got a nice King James Bible. I'll just show you what I got real quick here. Here's a nice King James Bible. It's concise, got the little marker thing in there. I like that. I often use that. I have a MacArthur Bible, which I like just because I like to see the commentary sometimes. I have this other Bible here, big print, Revised Standard Edition, sort of the Catholic edition. It's okay. I find it convenient. You know, Bible Hub's the best. This real quickly gives me all the major versions, and I can look at it and see which one works best with whatever I'm doing. I have one of these Catholic Bibles, but it actually kind of is not that good. So for what that's worth, BibleHub.org is the best Bible website in my experience. I'll show you one other Bible website that looks promising. I haven't used it that much. So I really haven't used it that much at all. I'm very happy with BibleHub.org. I find whatever I want very quickly, no problems. But for what it's worth, here's another one, BibleGateway.com, and you can see how it prints out. Everything's abbreviated, but for what it's worth, that's just another option. Okay, Christianity is the most popular religion in the world. There's over 200 billion Christians in the world. America has about 74 million Catholics, about 70 million Protestants, but the percentage of Christians in the United States is rapidly declining. In the 1990s, it was over 90% of the population. In 2007, it was about 78% of the population. In 2022, it was only 64%. So if this continues pretty quickly, the United States won't even be majority Christian. And I'm, not exactly sure how this all has happened. I think a lot of it is people losing their faith, being sort of tricked by all the con artists on the internet into becoming atheists and giving up religion. Because a lot of the immigrants that come in are Christians, so it doesn't seem to be it's just an immigration thing. For what that's worth, I mentioned, BibleHub.org, the best Bible website that I'm aware of. Bible Gateway, I mentioned that, is potentially good, but I don't got much experience with it. Okay, here's some other quotes. This is from John Adams, one of the founding fathers of the United States of America. He said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." Okay, here's a quote about the Bible by Horace Greeley. "It is impossible to enslave mentally or socially a Bible-reading people. The principles of the Bible are the groundwork of human freedom." And that is true, because once you read the Bible, there's all kinds of stuff about slavery in the Bible, and you become convinced afterwards that it's a bad idea. And Christianity doesn't always remove slavery from a society, but it pushes very strongly to do so, and it eventually does, as happened in England and the United States. There's a lot of places around the world that still have slavery, and modern slavery is often just called communism. Okay, here's some quotes from the Bible from Proverbs 22, chapter 22, verse 28. "Remove not the ancient landmark which thine fathers have set." I would agree with that. When you remove some of these ancient landmarks and statues, you're destroying history. You're erasing history. And I think there's a big effort afoot to try to erase Western civilization and try to sort of like reverse engineer history. If you look at some of these people, you're always going to find some significant flaw in, great men of the past. They lived within the context of their time. So there's always going to be something retrospectively someone could say is bad about them. Look at Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence. The guy was a genius, okay? But yeah, did he do some things wrong? Sure he did. He was, he owned slaves, typically had about 100 slaves at a time. But that doesn't detract from the Declaration of Independence, being, a great thing. In 1776, the Americans pushing for freedom. Yes, they should have given freedom to their slaves, but they couldn't do that at that time, or they would lose the unity of all 13 colonies. And they had to have the unity of all 13 colonies if they were going to stand up to the British. So, people should be judged in the context of their time. Okay, here's another quote from the Bible, from Proverbs chapter 26, verse 11. As a dog returneth to his vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly. And that's a typical thing. We see that all the time with people who are not interested in learning about the vegan diet, despite the fact they're fat and sick with all these problems. Okay, I know a lot of people, men and women, they are very sad because they're obese, but they will not consider the vegan diet. And so they're going to be obese all the rest of their life. Most fat people I've known, they're fat forever. And the only way you're going to do it is to change what you eat. Okay, Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. My people perish from a lack of knowledge. Yeah, knowledge is power in the sense that, if you see a car coming towards you, you jump out of the way. But if the car is invisible, how do you jump out of the way? And if you don't know about the problems associated with meat, processed food, and all the additives that put into it, etc., and all the estrogenic chemicals, how are you going to avoid them? That's why it's worthwhile to learn about that stuff. Here's one I like. This is from Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 1 to 3. The valley was full of bones, and lo, they were very dry. Can these bones live? O ye dry bones, hear the word of the Lord, and come alive. So I like that one because there's a song by Lauren Daigle. She's a great Christian singer, and it's called Dry Bones Come Alive. I like to play that, I'm getting kind of old. I'm still a pretty strong old guy. And I'll play that when I'm lifting weights, and it's kind of inspiring. So I like that one. Here's one from Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created he him. Male and female created he them. So in Genesis, they only mention two genders, male and female. Okay? And I recently studied a whole bunch of history stuff, especially from the 1700s, and they only mention, in every single thing I ever read, male and female genders. For what that's worth, Ann Coulter has a quote. She said, once you get rid of God and man being made in his image, then you can rationalize anything. Yeah, she's right. Now, Ann Coulter and Ayn Rand kind of remind me of each other. They're both geniuses, and it's kind of like lots of people hate them. And I think what happens is a lot of people who like them don't say anything, but the people who hate them tend to speak up and say they hate them. And I also think anytime a woman is a genius, she's going to be kind of opinionated and say things unconventional, and people are going to, lash out and say bad things about her. But she's a genius. I mean, read her books. She's amazing. There's no modern woman who could write like that. I mean, I don't know if there's any guy that could write as well as her. I mean, she's a fantastic writer. Okay, I thought it was funny. She wrote a book a lot about evolutionary biology, and she's like a lawyer. She doesn't know that much about evolutionary biology. But the book was great. I was quite surprised by that. So what a smart person could do. Now here's one quote. This is from Job, book of Job, chapter 19, verse 35. I know that my Redeemer liveth. And that was a great song in Handel's Messiah. And that's one thing you find as you go through the Bible. Tons of these great songs, they come from Bible passages. And also, if you're going to read Western literature and understand Western civilization, you don't have to read the Bible cover to cover, but you have to know the basics of it. You have to know the basics of what the Old Testament's about, the basics of what the New Testament's about, some of the major stories and events in the Bible. I mean, you can't read in Western literature intelligently without knowing that. And I got news for you. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in Western civilization and history that you can't understand without having a basic understanding of the Bible. So it's time well spent. A lot of times it can be nice, take a course in it, listen to a video lecture. There's a lot of free lectures online, and there's some courses you have to pay for if you want. They're pretty cheap. Wondrium is pretty cheap, has a lot of info about the Bible. Okay, here's something I like. This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 13 and 14. You are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill. And then another way of phrasing it, you are the light of the world. Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And so what I see relevant to that is that's a song by Jean Grief. I think it's Jean-Anthony Grief. I think it sounds like a French guy. You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before men. And so the reason I mention that is I just recently saw a video on the internet singing that song by a bunch of men from Singapore. Now, Singapore, I don't even know much about Singapore. I've never heard of anything coming from Singapore. I know some people have investments there, but what am I saying? So here's a bunch of people from Singapore who I know nothing about, but they had a chorus, and their chorus sang this song, "You are the light of the world, let your light shine before the men." And it was absolutely beautiful. And so that's one of the great things about religion is somebody on the other side of the planet can simply put together a nice chorus group of singers and a good conductor and make beautiful music. It was great. And I was like, wow, coming from Singapore, last place I'd expect. There should be more people singing that from all over the place. But that tells you something. Singapore can share something nice without, there it is. That's what Christianity can do. It unites people. It gives them something beautiful to share. And I remember, too, I told you about that Filipino lady. It was like her worship night. And I don't even know her name, but she sang "Sing Hallelujah" to the Lord. And it was so magnificent. It was just like the voice of an angel. I've listened to that song over 100 times. Yeah, you would find her just by like GMS worship night, "Sing Hallelujah" to the Lord. And it's this Filipino lady, and man, is she good. Her voice is this good. Okay. All right, here's a quote by Eric Metaxas. He's an excellent writer. I should have an A right there in his name for spelling it. Belief in God is an act of faith, but so is believing that everything came from nothing. Okay? All right. And then a lot of young people are kind of ignorant and arrogant. They think they don't have anything to learn from the past. That's part of just being young, but it's also part of their lousy educations. So I'll just share with you. This is recently a young, good-looking, he's a real highly intelligent alcoholic, medical school dropout. This is a guy whose parents... used to tell me when he was in high school, he crushed all his AP tests. They said, oh, he's smarter than me. He's going to be a better doctor than me. And, I said, okay, sure, fine. Hopefully, good luck to the kid. So anyways, he grows up, and he's having some problems. And, his parents send him to talk to me. And he sees the Bible on my desk. And he says, why you have the Bible on your desk? That's ridiculous. It's a farce. I said to him, do you think Bach is a good composer? He goes, yeah, the greatest of all time. I said, do you think Michelangelo is a good artist? He goes, yes, the greatest of all time. I go, do you think Victor Hugo and Dostoevsky are good writers? He says, yes. And I asked him, what are they without the Bible and Christianity? He just gives me a blank stare, and I say, nothing, yeah. And he says, yes. I'm like, instead of mocking the Bible, you should learn something about it. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of stupid stuff in the Bible. That is true, okay? And there's a lot of boring, tedious stuff. That is true. But there's tons of great stuff in it, and you'd be amazed. It's got more well-known good quotes than any other book ever made in the history of the world. Now, Oscar Wilde, as an individual writer, has tons of great quotes, but the Bible has far, far more than he does. Okay, crap, my picture here. I can shrink my picture here. I can move it down here. Okay, this is from John Ruskin, and he's that crazy genius from the Victorian age in England who helped be part of the Christian revival, the Gothic revival, separate but related to the Oxford movement. Okay, so whatever merit there is in anything I have written is simply due to the fact that when I was a child, my mother daily read me part of the Bible and daily made me learn a part of it by heart. My mother's influence in molding my character was conspicuous. She forced me to learn daily long chapters of the King James Bible by heart. To that discipline and patient, accurate resolve, I owe not only much of my general power of taking pains, but of the best part of my taste for literature. John Ruskin. So, yeah, I mean, a kid should grow up learning about Bible stories, learning about Greek mythology. They should also learn about all the fairy tales. They should learn all the nursery rhymes. That will make them verbally sophisticated, and it'll be beneficial to them their whole life. And it'll also give them a more solid moral character. It makes people smarter. You look at smart cultures, you look at where there's a lot of excellent academic performance, you're going to see those kids read a lot when they were young and especially talked about books. Okay, that makes people smarter. You just get good at analyzing books the more you've done it, and it helps a lot to have done it when young. Okay, here's Goethe as like the best writer ever in the history of Germany, sort of like the German equivalent of Shakespeare. He says, "It is belief in the Bible which has served as the guide of my moral and literary life. Let mental culture go on advancing. Let the sciences progress and the human mind widen itself as much as it desires. It will not reach the elevation and moral culture of Christianity as it shines forth in the Gospels." So Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Okay, and I tell you that too because, I studied tons of biographies of geniuses, and this is a very common thing. The Bible just had this major influence on them. You see it over and over again. And that's also likely why I said, well, I think meditation's a bit of a joke. It's good to lower your stress, perhaps, in some situations, but I don't see people saying meditation is the thing that helped them become the genius that they are. I just don't see that, okay? All right, of course, Isaac Newton, the smartest person who ever lived. He said, "I have a fundamental belief in the Bible as the Word of God, written by those who are inspired. I study the Bible daily." Isaac Newton, the greatest scientific genius of all time. Now, he had also said things like, "I see the distance of the sun and the earth, how they're perfectly positioned to make life possible. That didn't happen by accident." Okay, that's part of the fine-tuning arguments, and believe me, there's a lot of them. We're not going to get into that today, but they're actually quite good both for astronomy and for biology. Okay, here's a quote from Charles Dickens. "The best short story in the English language is The Prodigal Son." And The Prodigal Son, yes, it's a fantastic story, but there's also a great song version of it. The best song version of The Prodigal Son is the one by Keith Green. It's a great song. You just go to YouTube and just type in Prodigal Son, Keith Green. It's a beautiful song. Okay, here's a couple quotes. This is St. John of Chrysostom. He says, "If you want to rise in your abilities, avoid luxury, for luxury lowers and degrades a person." Henry David Thoreau. "Most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are hindrances to the elevation of mankind." And George Orwell, he says, "A hedonistic lifestyle weakens people." So yeah, I totally agree with that. Hedonism weakens people. And sort of the best book on that topic would be Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And Aldous Huxley himself spiraled into decadence and became a drug addict. It's very sad. The guy was a genius. Brave New World is a magnificent book. But he then himself deteriorated, experimenting with LSD and stuff. Substance abuse always degrades people. It's not beneficial at all. None of them are worth doing or considering. There's no brain stimulants that have a positive net effect. That's an important point because people sometimes say to me, "Oh, do you think a student should take Ritalin or drink a lot of caffeine or all that?" No, nothing. Zero. Nothing. Not caffeine, not Ritalin. Nothing is what I recommend for absolute top-notch academic performance. Arvin Vohra, who works a lot with training kids for school, he says the same thing. All those stimulants, they degrade academic performance. Their net long-term effect is highly negative. Okay, so what else would I say about that? Yeah, there's a quote I liked. It's called, "Resources are the enemy of creativity." I don't know who made that quote, but the point is that you'll get better results having a few good resources or some good coaching or just reading some good books and then focusing all your energy on a task. A person with too many distractions usually ends up not achieving much because it's intensely focused energy that generates achievement. The tenacity, the persistence. Okay, Martin Luther, nice quote here. "Our Lord has written the promise of the resurrection, not in books alone, but in every leaf in springtime." So Martin Luther, he's a guy who's a little bit crazy, but he was also, a great writer. Very, talk about over-the-top, emotional, and often scatological, but that's partly what made him interesting to read. Even if you don't agree with him, he says a lot of things in a memorable, dramatic way. Okay, now we're going to have more Bible quotes in just a sec. Just a couple of these quotes to kind of set the mood, if you will. Nietzsche, the greatest anti-Christian person, that was most entertaining and clever in the things he said, even though I disagree with him. I respect his cleverness and his literary skill. So Nietzsche says, "Paul and the Protestants following Luther, they have removed moral responsibility from Christ's followers. They have watered down the idea of the imitation of Christ. The Christians do not practice the actions Jesus recommended for them. Salvation through faith alone has devalued earthly actions, enabled Christians to avoid the moral responsibility to perform good deeds. So that's Nietzsche. Okay, so where is that coming from? Basically, sort of the Lutheran concept was that man is saved by grace alone. It's not in his power to do anything significant to get him to be saved. So it's just his faith in God. Then he's saved then by God's grace, not by his own achievements. But that is an overinterpretation of the statement, and I actually think Luther was to some extent wrong. And by that I mean, like the book of James. Luther had said he wanted the book of James removed from the Bible because it says, faith alone is dead. You got to have faith without works is dead. You got to have good works, okay? And a useful way to see a connection between the 2 points of view is just basically, if your heart's in the right place, you're going to do the right thing. So if you really do have faith in God and the Bible and stuff, then you should show it by, obeying the 10 Commandments, by being nice to people. And Bonhoeffer was a real famous Lutheran Christian in the 1900s, 1930s especially, and he emphasized this concept of cheap grace. He said, it's easy to say, I believe in God. It's not so easy to be a good Christian and act the way you should. Okay, there's a great story in the Bible about the book of Ruth and what had happened. It was kind of sad. Naomi, her husband and her son had died, and Naomi was going to go back to the town of her birth, and she was going to leave Ruth. Ruth was her daughter-in-law, and they were good friends, and they wanted to stay together. And so when Naomi thought she would never see Ruth again, she told her she was leaving to go back to the town of her birth. Ruth, her mother-in-law, said it to Ruth, and Ruth replied, "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people shall be my people. Your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And may the Lord punish me if anything but death parts you and me." Ruth 1:16. I mean, that's like the love of a mother. I mean, that is powerful stuff. And that type of love, unconditional love, it does all kinds of great things for people. And I was pretty lucky, I think, having the unconditional love of your mother. And my mom used to say stuff like that to me, and that was good for me. It was kind of like my mom was always telling me how great I am and how much she loved me. My father was always telling me, you need to work harder, you need to work harder, you need to work harder. And, I guess the combination was good for me. Even though I was mad at my dad sometimes. I thought he was unreasonable. It was good to motivate me, and he was a great role model in a lot of ways. Okay, here's another Bible quote. This is from Exodus chapter 23, verse 2. "Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil." By the way, another way to learn the Bible is just watch Bible movies. Like if you watch the movie of a story of the Bible, like let's say the book of Ruth, for example, you will then you read it, it'll be much easier to read. Also, the first time you read it, if you get a Bible that has commentary in it, that'll sometimes help you. You only got to be a little careful because there's little games being played in the commentary sometime, like let's say Protestant versus Catholic, etc. So I'll leave that up to you, but those are just different ways to get into it. But I know that I did that many years ago, and I went to Catholic school for 8th grade, and I had some Bible knowledge just from my growing up and whatnot, but I also knew when I wanted to read deeper into the Bible, watching these video stories of all these stories in the Bible, it really helped me. I would watch the video, then read the chapter, and I understood it a lot better. And then what I found helpful is sometimes if I hear a quote in the Bible and it doesn't quite ring right, I'll look up BibleHub.org and I'll catch the best version of it, and I'll memorize the quote. Okay, here's from Psalm 23. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, because thou art with me." And I just kind of joke, I shall fear no disease, because the vegan diet is with me too. And the Bible's great for making these kind of spoof quotes. And I joke too that the vegan diet can be made a little bit religion-like. You can use Bible ideas and quotes to help spoof it up, spiff it up, whatever. And I have fun with that. And, this satire I don't think it's mocking the Bible. It's complimentary to the Bible. I have off the charts respect for the Bible. I just think it's fun. Okay? Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and you can take that in a bunch of directions. Socrates would say the proper naming of terms is the beginning of wisdom. In modern social life, fear of women is the beginning of wisdom. And you can go a lot of different directions to that. Fear of meat is the beginning of nutritional wisdom. Okay, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Yeah, I think that's important too. Kids got to be taught, how to behave and have good morals when they're young. Otherwise, they're out of control the rest of their life. And I think that's another reason why it's so good to have a father in the house, because even though the dad might not be around so much because he's working a lot, he sets a role model. He sets a standard. It's just different than a mom. And you learn a lot from both of your parents. Okay, Proverbs 23:7. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And I think that's a real important thing. If you want to be successful at anything, you have to say, I'm going to put everything into it, and this is who I'm going to be. Let it become part of your identity. Then you get a lot better at it. Like when I studied biochemistry, I didn't just say I want to study biochemistry and hopefully I'll get a good grade in the class. I said, no, this is the language of God, and this is how he writes the book of life. And if I want to be a great scientist or great doctor, I must understand this. And who knows, maybe I'll be a biochemist someday. And you tell your brain it's important, and then your brain remembers it. Your brain only is programmed to memorize long-term things that are important to you. Okay, here's another quote. This is Gospel according to John, chapter 10, verse 10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I come that the people may have life and have it more abundantly. Okay, here's Ecclesiastes, chapter 9, verses 16 to 17. The poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Words of the wise, spoken quietly, should be heard, rather than the shout of a ruler of fools. Okay, and that totally applies to, like, let's say, vegan diet on the internet. The poor man's wisdom is despised. I make this YouTube channel, just to help people be sort of a lighthouse in the darkness, so to speak. And then all these BS artists promoting paleo, carnivore, low-carb diet, all this nonsense that makes people sick. They got millions of views, This video here are Bible quotes, Good for people to know about the Bible. What is it going to get? 100 views or something, 200 maybe. And like I said, nonsense will get hundreds and hundreds, thousands, millions of views. Okay, here's another one. This is from Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 to 16. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves. Ye shall know them by their fruits. Okay, and so that's a common thing. I think a lot of people are so stupid, they'll vote for a politician who not only doesn't care about them, but actively hates them. They'll vote for somebody who hates them and is going to give them a bad deal. That's how stupid a lot of people are. And so that's why I think it's important for society that people have some education. And when I say education, I don't just mean go through the school system, which doesn't really educate people too much, that they read a little bit. They should really know the Bible. And that's why I think it's a big, unfortunate thing that they don't teach about the Greeks and the Romans and the Bible in school anymore, because there are a lot of valuable lessons to be learned by the Greeks and the Romans and the stuff in the Bible. I can tell you, I routinely, when I think of situations, I routinely see parallels to something from the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, or from the Bible. It's, of course, also from the Renaissance, etc. All right, Matthew chapter 10, verse 32. Whosoever shall speak for me before men, him I shall speak for before my Father in heaven. Okay. Here's Matthew. And that's another thing, too. You look at a society. Look at the Old Testament. What happens in the Old Testament? If the people turn away from God, their society starts going downhill. That's just a fact of life. You look in the modern world. When people turn their back on God, God turns his back on them. So it's real important that if people have respect for God. Remember, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. If a society loses its religion, it no longer holds together, and it collapses, and it disappears. Okay, so America losing its religion is bad. That's a bad omen. It's not too late, but it's a foreshadowing that America might disintegrate and collapse. I hope it doesn't happen, but it certainly looks like it might happen at this point. And don't be surprised. It's going to turn into this, it used to be e pluribus unum, out of many one, the melting pot. And now it's kind of becoming, all these separate cultures and an open border, and, America might, the way this is going, dissolve. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're combined into some type of North American Union with a combination of Mexico, United States, and Canada. And with all these different cultures and whatnot, you can bet it's headed toward atheistic Darwinism, communism. So I hope it doesn't go there, but it seems like it's headed that way. And hopefully people will wake up and realize all the great things they have from their past, all the great freedom America's had, and hopefully it will continue and be preserved. And that's what I meant by if a house is divided against itself, it cannot stand. No one can enter a strong man's house and steal his possession unless he first ties up the strong man. Then he can plunder his house. And I also think our society has become too much in favor of women. And, 60% of college students nowadays are women. Why isn't it 50%, 50-50? All right? And I see then there's so much estrogen in the tap water, estrogen in all the meat, estrogen in all the cosmetic products. When I say estrogen, I mean estrogenic chemicals, the preservatives, the herbicides, the pesticides. Our society is being overly, the estrogenic component, it's being overemphasized. And people say, well, so what? No, well, the reason that matters is it's not maintaining its traditions. So if a society doesn't maintain its traditions, doesn't maintain its religion, it disappears. Most societies don't last. They only last a little while, and then they lose their religion and they disappear. Okay, a society that's even conquered in war, it doesn't disappear. Look at Poland. Poland's been conquered plenty of times. There's still Poland in the country and Poland in the people. But a society that loses its religion will then fall apart, even if it was never conquered, so to speak. And America seems to be heading that way as the percent of Christians just drops. And what's going to unify it once that's gone? What's going to unify it is just going to be brutal force and a whole bunch of rules that drive you crazy. So hopefully it's not going to get to that point, but it's kind of heading there. Okay, one more quote. This will be the last one for this set of Bible quotes for today. This is Gospel according to Mark, chapter 2, verse 17. Them that are whole have no need of a physician. And it's like perfect for setting up quotes about the vegan diet. Them that are whole food vegans have no need of a physician. So anyways, hope that was interesting.